Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT ranked meta video. Our analysts are here to go through the 1025 meta for each stage of the game. Continuing off of the changes introduced in 1024, the meta has really settled down into a great spot. There's multiple ways that you can go about playing the mid game, and the late game is important to prepare properly for. We'll be covering items and then breaking down how to go about each stage of the game from early to late. With that said, let's dive on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. To start off, let's go over the current item meta. Honestly, the meta is in a really great place right now as there's plenty of options available for every component. What's more important than specific components is aiming to have a slammable early game item that can boost your board strength. The top items to look for in that case are Locket, Zeke's Herald, Chalice of Power, Sunfire Cape, Hand of Justice, and ZZ Rot Portal. Other items you can look for early game include Blue Buff, Guardian Angel, and Luden's Echo. Luden's is a bit niche as you need CC to really make use of its full potential. The other two items are okay early on, but are better off later in the game. For the items we initially listed, the priority of components should go towards the primary components, then the secondary. That means Sword, Rod, Tier, and Glove are generally better to grab during the early carousel since they tend to be the most contested. Belt, Cloak, and Chain Vest are far easier to get later on, and Bow can go either way depending on the meta. That said, there's honestly only one component you should avoid during the beginning carousel, and that's Cloak. Cloak has a few uses in the meta, most notably Chalice, but starting off with Cloak gives you far fewer options than the other components. It's even worse if you end up with multiple Cloaks early on, since Dragonclaw doesn't really provide much value until the late game. Overall, the meta favors slamming early items, so keep that in mind when grabbing components from the carousel. Look at what you have available and plan ahead for what you may be able to make. Once you hit the mid-game and beyond, you should look for more champion or composition-specific items like Quicksilver, Infinity Edge, or RFC. Avoid making them too early on since they either won't provide much, such as a QSS, or may pigeonhole your composition into a certain direction, such as with RFC. The important piece of information to keep in mind is playing to improve your current board strength. Early game, look to make use of those universally good items. In particular, Aura utility items are fantastic. Mid-game, you'll want to cater towards whichever composition you're aiming for, whether that's more magic damage focused or physical. Late game, the utility items are going to get far more value, such as a Quicksilver, Shroud, or Zephyr. Let's move on now and break down each stage of the game, beginning with the early game. The early game goes from the beginning carousel until just after Krugs, generally ending around 3-2, when most of the lobby will be leveling to 6. As we've already covered the beginning carousel, we can move on into Stage 1. Stage 1 is simple since the goal is to find pairs and try to 2-star what you can before the PvP rounds. Don't worry about saving gold here as you'll want to give yourself as many options as possible. While you may want to pick up a Chosen during this stage, it can be a good idea to wait. Certain traits will do better than others, such as Brawler, Duelist, or Keeper. Both Cultist and Warlord are great if you have additional champions of those traits, otherwise you may want to skip them for now. Overall, any Chosen at this stage can be fine to pick up, just weigh the options presented to you based on what champions you've bought so far. Before we move on, the last thing to consider during Stage 1 is pre-leveling to level 4. This can be done in the last PvE round if you've got extra gold to spend, and can result in a huge early game power spike if you high roll either a 2-cost Chosen or a good 3-star champion. Now on to Stage 2. For the most part, the goal here is to play your strongest board and save health. While you can't control exactly what champions will be finding, you can slam early items and look to level to 4 if you didn't pre-level earlier. Leveling on 2-1 gives you an opportunity to roll a 2-cost Chosen on 2-2, or you can play for the standard timing of leveling at 2-2. It mainly depends on how much gold you have. One thing to consider during Stage 2, if possible, is to try and play Fortune. Whether you win or not, the value you gain from Fortune during Stage 2 should be worth it, even if you lose health, as additional gold from winning or a large payout from losing is really good. If you can't hit 10 gold by the end of 2-3, you should look to pre-level to 5 during the carousel round, otherwise level on 2-5. If you find an early Chosen Yasuo and it looks like Duelist is an option, or if you have a Diana in Moonlight, you can skip leveling early since you'll be slow rolling at level 5 later on. Overall, as mentioned, the goal during Stage 2 is to save health. Build up your economy as you can, but if you're given the option of a 2-star 2-cost unit or a strong 3-cost unit like Kindred, take them. Winning and keeping your health high will help a lot during the mid-game. In general, you should aim to be above 80 health going into Stage 3 with at least 20 gold by Krugs. There's still a bit left for the early game, but since we're moving towards level 6, let's go ahead and talk about the mid game. This begins around 3-2 when players are hitting level 6 and goes through stage 4 and ends around the latter half of stage 5. After Krugs, we're moving into stage 3, which is where you can do quite a few things depending on your board state. The first thing to consider is when you want to level to 6. Generally, this is going to be on 3-2, but you can wait a round or two if you're nearing 50 gold and want a slow level. Another option, as mentioned, is the slow roll at level 5 for reroll compositions like Duelist or Moonlight. Once you're level 6, you can either sit on your gold or roll. It mainly depends on how strong your board feels and whether or not you're near a large power spike. For example, this is the time where 6 Warlords will do really well, so if you're close to hitting 6, you may want to roll a bit of gold and try to hit. Don't overspend, so only roll 2, maybe 3 times for a couple of rounds. In the case where your board is strong enough to not roll, then you're sitting in a great spot and you can go up to 50 gold economy. There are times where you high rolled super hard and are still on a win streak at this point of the game, so you can look to level to 7 early as 3-5 if you have the money to do so. Generally, this isn't worth it, so only do it if you know leveling will keep your win streak going. And that's really it for stage 3. Keep building your economy, roll if you're weak or near a power spike, and pick up any strong 4-cost champions that you can, like Shen or Riven. Also, make sure you're scouting to see what other champions players have hit so you have an idea of what you're able to find at level 7. Since we're moving towards level 7, let's talk about stage 4. At the very beginning of this stage, you'll want to level to 7. In the past, this was the time to roll all of your gold, but that's not the case anymore. Rolling is still advisable, but do not overspend. Look for power spikes to your current board, such as 2-starring a 3-cost champion. Another way to boost your board at this stage is to sell an early chosen to try and find a strong 3-cost chosen. For the most part, you may want to wait to sell your chosen unless you've been losing rounds leading up to level 7. One of the biggest mistakes players make at level 7 and later level 8 is selling their board off too quickly. Especially at level 7, the goal is not to replace everything you have for a certain composition, it should be to augment what you have so you can work towards level 8. If you've been doing well prior to level 7, you can sit on your current board. Otherwise, roll a bit to stabilize. There's a lot of mid-game composition to look out for during stage 3. Some of the more general synergies to play for include Dusk, Elderwood, and Divine. Those 3 are great to build off during stage 4 and transition well later on. 6 Warlords and 6 Cultists really spike hard during stage 3 and 4, so you can always use them at level 7 before transitioning out of them later. All in all, stage 4 is about stabilizing your board as best you can without spending too much gold since you want to aim for level 8. Stabilizing means upgrading the champions you have, adding in a few 4-cost champions, and looking for a solid 3-cost chosen if your current one has been outscaled. Before we move into the late game, let's start off by talking about stage 5. Stage 5 is where you're aiming to hit level 8 and begin filling in the rest of your comp. The timing for level 8 varies a lot as it depends entirely how strong your board became during level 7. If you've been winning most rounds and kept a good economy, you can level to 8 anytime between 5-1 and 5-3. For those of you that high rolled, you can possibly level as early as 4-3 or anytime before 5-1. The rule to follow here is to try to have at least 30 gold after you leveled to roll if you need it. Lastly, if you didn't have a strong stage 4 and lost a majority of the rounds, you may need to spend more gold instead of leveling to stabilize. Otherwise, you'll want to level as soon as you can and all in your gold. Now, once you've hit level 8, the plan here is a lot like level 7. Roll to stabilize if you need, but don't overspend unless you're losing a lot of health each round. This is the level that you will usually sell your previous chosen as you want to try and play for a 4-cost chosen. Don't be picky about what you're given as you generally build around any useful trait if it's a 4-cost champion. Again, keep in mind that you don't want to sell your entire board after leveling. Replace champions as needed and upgrade what you can, but straight up selling off a lot of champions often results in a weaker board for a few rounds. Only do that if you've already been losing and need to stabilize quickly. As for what traits or champions to look for, it really depends on what the game gives you. Dusk is one of the more flexible traits you can build a composition around, but if you found a Warwick or Ashe carry, you can look to play a build like Hunter Adept, Brawler Elderwood, or Divine. Whichever champions or traits you found, there are a few to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and move into the late game as we talk about champions and traits. Traits to look for at level 8 and beyond are usually going to be either useful for your main synergy or a splash trait. The 2 best splash traits are Adept and Mystic, so try to add those in if you can. Shen, for example, is one of the best champions in the game and has both Adept and Mystic as tags. For specific champions, well, 5-cost units are the way to go. The late game meta is all about adding in 5-cost champions wherever you can, with an emphasis on carries like Yone or Kayn and utility champions like Zillion or Ezreal. But don't get too greedy. If you find a set 2, play him. It is very important to make your board as strong as you can at this stage of the game. Since we're into the late game, let's talk about stage 6 and beyond. There's not much that you have to worry about at this point in the game, since the overall goal is simple. Add in legendaries where you can, upgrade your existing board, and position based on what you've been scouting. Level 9 is the big what if of the late game, and while you do want to look for it, most of the time you won't be able to hit it as it's just too expensive. Only look to level to 9 if your board is as strong as it can get without getting lucky and hitting a bunch of 5-cost champions. All in all, the late game is really determined by your early and mid game. Look to play those parts of the game better and save health, as it will help your late game out a lot. The higher health you have going into stage 6, the better the chance you have at finishing in the top 4 or even winning. That's all we have for today's video, folks. Patch 1025 is the last patch of the year, so enjoy the current meta for a few weeks longer than usual. As for us over here at GiantSlayerTV, we'll be taking the next 2 weeks off, so we wish you all a happy holiday. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future GiantSlayerTV videos.